My wife cheated on me with the postman, but when I forgave her, her parents came and blamed me for everything. I need some advice and to get a few things off my chest. This all started a couple of months ago, but the aftermath is something I'm still grappling with. I'm 34 and my name is John. My wife Sarah is 32. We've been married for 8 years, and until recently I thought we had a pretty solid relationship. We have a 7-year-old son named Jake, and we've built a nice life together. Or so I thought. Sarah and I met in college. She was vibrant, full of life, and had this contagious laugh that made everyone around her smile. We hit it off immediately, and our relationship blossomed quickly. After graduating, we moved to a small town where I landed a job as an engineer, and Sarah started working as a teacher. Life was good. We bought a house, got a dog, and eventually welcomed Jake into our lives. It felt like we were living the dream. About 6 months ago, things started to change. Sarah became distant. She was always on her phone, texting and laughing at messages that she never shared with me. I tried to brush it off as her needing some space, but the feeling that something was off gnawed at me. Our sex life, which had always been passionate and frequent, dwindled to almost nothing. When I brought it up, she'd say she was tired or stressed from work. I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt, thinking maybe she was going through something she wasn't ready to talk about. I picked up extra chores around the house and tried to be as supportive as possible. But the more I tried to bridge the gap, the more she seemed to pull away. One fateful Saturday morning, I decided to surprise Sarah with breakfast in bed. Jake was at a sleepover, so it was the perfect opportunity for some alone time. As I was about to head back upstairs with the tray, the doorbell rang. It was the mailman, Mike, who had a package for us. Mike had been our mailman for years. He was always friendly, and we'd often chat about sports or the weather. Today, though, he seemed unusually nervous. I signed for the package and thanked him, but as I closed the door, I realized he hadn't driven away. Instead, he was just standing there, staring at our house. I thought it was odd, but didn't dwell on it. I went upstairs to find Sarah wasn't in bed. I called out to her, and she responded from the bathroom, saying she'd be out in a minute. Something felt wrong. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was Mike's strange behavior, or maybe it was just my gut finally piecing things together. I walked to our bedroom window and looked out. There was Mike, standing by his truck, glancing back at our house. It was then that I saw Sarah's reflection in the mirror on our bedroom wall. She wasn't getting dressed or brushing her hair. She was peeking out the bathroom window, looking at Mike. My heart sank. I quietly put the tray down and walked to the bathroom. I opened the door without knocking, and there she was, her face pale as a ghost, holding her phone and staring at the window. She turned to me, her eyes wide with shock and guilt. "John, it's not what you think," she stammered. But it was exactly what I thought. I could see the guilt written all over her face. I felt a rush of anger and betrayal. I stormed out of the bathroom, grabbed my keys, and drove away without a word. I needed to clear my head. I spent the day driving aimlessly, thinking about our life together, trying to make sense of it all. How had it come to this? I thought about Jake and what this would mean for him. By the time I returned home, it was late. Sarah was waiting for me in the living room, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She confessed everything. She had been having an affair with Mike for the past few months. It started innocently enough. Casual chats at the mailbox turned into longer conversations, and before she knew it, they were meeting in secret. The worst part? They had been intimate right there in our house while Jake and I were asleep upstairs. I felt like my world had crumbled. The woman I loved, the mother of my child, had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible. I didn't know how to process it. I wanted to scream, to hit something, but all I could do was sit there in stunned silence. Sarah begged for forgiveness. She said it was a mistake, that she still loved me and wanted to work things out. But how could I ever trust her again? I spent the next few days in a daze, going through the motions of life but feeling completely disconnected. I decided to confront Mike. I needed to hear his side of the story, to understand why he did this. When I saw him next, I called him over and asked him to sit down. I didn't yell or get physical, though I wanted to. I just asked him why. Mike seemed genuinely remorseful. He said he never intended for things to go this far, that he got caught up in the excitement of it all. He apologized profusely and promised to leave Sarah alone. But his words didn't mean much to me. The damage was already done. In the weeks that followed, Sarah and I had countless heart-to-heart talks. She agreed to go to counseling, and I reluctantly agreed to join her. We started to rebuild our relationship, but it was slow and painful. Every time I looked at her, I saw the betrayal in her eyes. I wondered if we could ever truly get past this. One evening, I came home to find Sarah in the kitchen cooking dinner. She looked up and gave me a weak smile. It was then that I realized I had a choice to make. I could either let this affair destroy us, or we could use it as a catalyst to rebuild our marriage stronger than before. We decided to take a break from each other to clear our heads and figure out what we really wanted. Sarah moved in with her sister, and Jake stayed with me. It was hard, but the time apart gave us both the space we needed to reflect. During this time, I reconnected with old friends, picked up new hobbies, and spent as much time as possible with Jake. I realized how much of myself I had lost in my marriage, always putting Sarah and Jake first. I needed to find myself again before I could even think about rebuilding our relationship. Sarah and I continued with counseling separately and together. We began to communicate more openly than we ever had before. She expressed her regret and guilt, and I shared my feelings of anger and betrayal. It was raw and painful, but it was also healing. After 6 months apart, we decided to give our marriage another shot. Sarah moved back home, and we set new ground rules for our relationship. Trust needed to be rebuilt, and we were both committed to making it work. The process was slow, but over time, we started to find our way back to each other. We took things one day at a time, focusing on the positive aspects of our relationship and working through the negative ones together. We learned to appreciate each other in new ways and to value the importance of honesty and communication. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I wanted to give up. But for Jake's sake and for the love we still had for each other, we persevered. We created new memories, went on trips, and started new traditions as a family. Slowly but surely, we began to heal. One day, while we were having a quiet evening at home, Sarah took my hand and looked me in the eyes. She apologized once again, and for the first time, I truly believed her. It wasn't just words, it was a promise to never hurt me like that again. And in that moment, I forgave her. Our marriage isn't perfect, and it never will be. But we've come a long way from that fateful day when I discovered her betrayal. We're stronger now, and our love is deeper because we've faced our darkest moments together and come out the other side. Just when I thought things were finally starting to get back to normal, another storm hit our lives. This time, it involved Sarah's parents, Carol and Robert. They live a few hours away, so we don't see them often, but they always had a strained relationship with me. They never really accepted me as part of the family, and I always felt like I was never good enough for their daughter. But this time, their actions went beyond their usual coldness. One Sunday afternoon, while Sarah and I were lounging in the backyard enjoying a rare moment of peace, I heard the sound of a car pulling into our driveway. I looked up to see Carol and Robert stepping out of their car, their faces set with grim determination. They didn't even greet us as they stormed through the backyard gate and approached us. Without any preamble, Carol started accusing me of being the one who cheated. She claimed that Sarah had confided in her and Robert about my supposed affair, and they were here to confront me. I was stunned. This was a complete fabrication, and I couldn't understand why they would make such an outrageous claim. Sarah, equally shocked, tried to explain that it was she who had the affair, but her parents wouldn't hear it. They were adamant that I had manipulated Sarah into taking the blame to save my own skin. They demanded that I leave the house immediately, and when I refused, they threatened to take legal action. Things escalated quickly. Carol and Robert left in a huff, vowing to see me in court. Over the next few weeks, I received legal notices accusing me of adultery and emotional abuse. They were suing for full custody of Jake, claiming I was an unfit father. I was in disbelief. How could they twist the truth so horribly? Sarah and I lawyered up. We had to fight not only for our marriage, but now for our family's integrity and the right to keep our son. The court case was grueling. Carol and Robert had somehow gathered a few dubious neighbors who testified that they had seen me with another woman, fabricated text messages that painted me as an abusive husband, and even false financial records, implying that I had been hiding money. Our lawyer, a sharp and determined woman named Laura, worked tirelessly to disprove every lie. She found inconsistencies in the witnesses' testimonies, proved the text messages were doctored, and exposed the financial records as forgeries. But it was still exhausting, emotionally draining, and incredibly stressful. Sarah was a wreck. She felt responsible for bringing this chaos into our lives, and I struggled to reassure her while dealing with my own frustration and anger. Jake was confused and scared, not understanding why his grandparents were suddenly acting like enemies. We tried to shield him from the worst of it, but some things couldn't be hidden. After months of battling in court, the truth finally prevailed. The judge saw through the lies and manipulations, ruling in our favor. Carol and Robert's case was dismissed, and they were sternly warned against further legal harassment. It was a victory, but it felt hollow. The damage to our relationship with Sarah's parents was irreparable, and the emotional toll on our family was immense. We thought we could finally move on and start the healing process again, but then something even more shocking happened. One evening, a few weeks after the court ruling, there was a loud banging on our front door. I opened it to find a man I didn't recognize standing there. He looked furious, his eyes blazing with anger. He introduced himself as Frank, Mike's older brother. Mike, the mailman with whom Sarah had the affair, had apparently spiraled into depression and substance abuse after everything came to light. He had lost his job, his friends, and his self-respect. Frank blamed me for ruining his brother's life and had come to exact revenge. Before I could react, Frank pushed his way into the house, shouting threats and accusations. He was clearly unstable, and I feared for our safety. Sarah came rushing down the stairs, alarmed by the commotion, and Jake peeked around the corner, eyes wide with fear. I tried to calm Frank down, to reason with him, but he wasn't interested in talking. He lunged at me, and we struggled, knocking over furniture and smashing a lamp in the process. Sarah screamed for him to stop, and Jake started crying, which seemed to snap Frank out of his rage momentarily. In that brief pause, I managed to push him out of the house and lock the door. Frank pounded on the door, yelling obscenities and threats, but eventually he left, vowing to return and finish what he started. We immediately called the police, who arrived shortly after to take our statements and patrol the neighborhood. For days we lived in fear, not knowing if or when Frank would come back. We installed security cameras and reinforced our locks, trying to create some semblance of safety. But the psychological impact was profound. Sarah and I were constantly on edge, and Jake had nightmares about the angry man who had invaded our home. Frank's attack was the breaking point for me. I realized that despite our efforts to rebuild, the fallout from Sarah's affair had created a ripple effect that we couldn't control. Our lives had become a series of crises, each one more devastating than the last. I started to question everything: my decisions, my relationship with Sarah, even my own ability to protect my family. The stress was overwhelming, and I felt myself slipping into a dark place. Sarah noticed and urged me to seek help, but I resisted. I didn't want to appear weak or incapable. But one night, as I sat alone in the dark, replaying the events of the past year in my mind, I realized I couldn't do this alone. I needed help, not just for myself, but for Sarah and Jake, too. I reached out to a therapist, and Sarah and I decided to continue with marriage counseling. We also found a child therapist for Jake to help him process everything he had been through. Therapy was a lifeline. It gave me a safe space to express my fears and frustrations, and it helped me develop coping mechanisms for the anxiety and stress. Sarah and I worked on our communication, rebuilding trust one step at a time. It was slow, painful progress, but it was progress nonetheless. Jake started to open up in his sessions, and we saw a gradual improvement in his mood and behavior. He began to sleep better, his nightmares less frequent, and he started to regain some of his old spark. Seeing him smile again gave me hope that we could find our way back to some form of normalcy. Meanwhile, the police kept a close watch on Frank. He was eventually arrested for assault and trespassing, and a restraining order was put in place to keep him away from us. The relief was immense, but the scars of his attack lingered. As the months passed, life slowly started to regain a sense of routine. Sarah and I continued our therapy. Jake returned to school with a bit more confidence. and I focused on my work, trying to regain some semblance of stability. We took it day by day, celebrating small victories and supporting each other through setbacks. Through all of this, I learned the importance of resilience and the power of love and forgiveness. Our marriage had been tested in ways I never imagined, and while the pain of betrayal still lingered, it had also brought us closer together. We had faced our darkest moments and come out the other side, battered but not broken. One evening, as we sat together in the backyard watching the sunset, I looked at Sarah and Jake and felt a profound sense of gratitude. We had been through hell, but we were still standing, still fighting for each other. And that in itself was a victory. So here we are, still navigating the aftermath of everything that happened. It's not easy, and there are days when the weight of it all feels overwhelming. But we've learned to lean on each other, to communicate openly, and to cherish the moments of peace and happiness that come our way. Life is unpredictable and often unfair, but it's also filled with opportunities for growth and redemption. We've chosen to focus on those opportunities, to build a future that, while scarred by the past, is also defined by our resilience and love. If there's one thing I've learned from this ordeal, it's that healing is a journey, not a destination. It takes time, patience, and a lot of hard work. But with the right support and a commitment to each other, it's possible to find a way forward, even from the darkest of places. Hey, Reddit, it's John again. I never thought I'd be back here with another update, but life has a way of throwing curveballs at you when you least expect it. After everything that happened with Sarah, her parents, and Mike's brother, I thought we had finally reached a place where things were starting to stabilize. I was wrong. For a while, things did seem to get better. Sarah and I continued with therapy, both individually and together. Jake seemed to be doing better as well, slowly returning to his cheerful self. We tried to build a new normal, but the cracks in our marriage were still there, just beneath the surface. Sarah started working longer hours. She said it was because she wanted to make up for lost time and to prove that she could still be a great teacher despite everything that had happened. I supported her, thinking that staying busy might help her cope. But soon the late nights at school became more frequent, and the excuses started to feel hollow. One night, after putting Jake to bed, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was one of Sarah's colleagues, Emily, who I had met a few times at school events. Emily sounded nervous and hesitant. She told me she had seen Sarah at a local bar with another man, and it didn't look like a professional meeting. My heart sank. Not again. The next day, I confronted Sarah. She denied everything at first, but the evidence was undeniable. Emily had even taken pictures to show me, not to hurt me, but because she felt I deserved to know the truth. The man in the pictures was Mark, another teacher at Sarah's school. They were holding hands, laughing, and it was clear that there was something more than just a friendship between them. Sarah eventually admitted to the affair. She cried and apologized, saying it was a mistake and that she didn't want to lose me. But I couldn't go through this again. The betrayal was too deep, and I knew that no amount of therapy could fix what was broken this time. I told her I wanted a divorce. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of emotions and legal proceedings. Sarah moved out and went to stay with her sister again, and Jake stayed with me. It was hard explaining to him what was happening, but I tried to be as honest as possible without hurting him. I told him that sometimes adults have problems they can't fix, but that both his mom and I loved him very much. The divorce was finalized quickly, and Sarah and I agreed on shared custody of Jake. It was painful, but it was also a relief. I needed to move on, to start a new chapter in my life without the constant fear of betrayal hanging over me. I threw myself into work and focused on being the best father I could be for Jake. But loneliness crept in. I missed the companionship, the feeling of being loved and supported. I started to go out more, reconnecting with old friends and making new ones. It was during one of these outings that I met Laura. Laura was different from anyone I had ever met. She was confident, intelligent, and had a warmth about her that drew people in. We hit it off immediately, and over time our friendship blossomed into something more. She knew about my past and was incredibly supportive, always there to listen and offer a shoulder to lean on. Our relationship moved quickly but naturally. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely happy and hopeful about the future. Laura and Jake got along well, and seeing them together filled my heart with joy. It wasn't long before I proposed, and she said yes. We had a small, intimate wedding with close friends and family, and it was perfect. Life with Laura was everything I had ever wanted. We shared the same values, supported each other's dreams, and built a loving home for Jake. For a while, it felt like all the pieces of my life had finally fallen into place. But the past has a way of resurfacing when you least expect it. One evening, as Laura and I were preparing dinner, the doorbell rang. It was Sarah. She looked distraught and desperate. She apologized for showing up unannounced, but said she needed to talk to me. Laura, always understanding, gave us some space. Sarah told me that Mark had ended their relationship shortly after our divorce was finalized. She had been struggling ever since, feeling lost and alone. She admitted that she missed our life together and had made a terrible mistake by betraying me again. She wanted to know if there was any chance we could try again, for Jake's sake. I was stunned. I couldn't believe she was asking this after everything that had happened. I told her that while I would always care for her as Jake's mother, my heart belonged to Laura now, and there was no going back. Sarah left in tears, and I felt a pang of sadness for her, but also a sense of closure. As the months passed, I focused on my new life with Laura and Jake. We faced the usual challenges of blending families and navigating new dynamics, but we did it together, with love and patience. Jake was thriving, and I finally felt at peace. However, just when I thought the past was truly behind us, a new threat emerged. One evening, as we were all sitting down for dinner, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Frank, Mike's brother, who had been released from jail. He had been stewing in his anger and had somehow found out about my new life. He made it clear that he hadn't forgotten what he believed was my role in his brother's downfall, and he was coming for me. Fear gripped me, but I tried to stay calm for Laura and Jake. I contacted the police and informed them of the threat. They advised us to be vigilant and assured us that they would keep an eye on the situation. We increased our home security and tried to carry on with our lives as normally as possible, but the fear was always there, lurking in the back of my mind. A few weeks later, Frank made good on his threat. He showed up at Jake's school one afternoon, causing a scene and demanding to see me. The school went into lockdown and the police were called. They apprehended Frank before he could do any harm, but the incident left us all shaken. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. It was clear that Frank wasn't going to stop until he had his revenge. I took extra precautions, making sure Laura and Jake were never alone and always aware of their surroundings. The police increased their patrols around our neighborhood, and we tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for Jake's sake. One night, as Laura and I were getting ready for bed, I heard a noise outside. I looked out the window and saw a shadowy figure moving around our yard. My heart raced as I grabbed my phone and called the police. Laura stayed with Jake, keeping him calm and out of sight. The police arrived quickly and caught Frank trying to break into our house. He was arrested and charged with attempted burglary and harassment. The relief was overwhelming, but so was the realization that our lives had been forever altered by his obsession. Frank's arrest brought a semblance of peace, but the scars of his actions remained. We worked hard to rebuild our sense of security, but there were nights when I would lie awake, haunted by the what-ifs. Laura was my rock during these times, always reminding me of the strength we had as a family. We continued with therapy, both individually and as a family, to process the trauma and find ways to move forward. It was a long and difficult journey, but with time and support, we began to heal. Through it all, I learned the importance of resilience and the power of love. Laura and I grew even closer, our bond strengthened by the challenges we faced together. Jake, too, showed incredible strength and maturity, and I was proud of the young man he was becoming. Life eventually settled into a new rhythm. We focused on the positives, celebrating the small victories and cherishing the moments of joy. Laura and I made a conscious effort to create happy memories for Jake, taking trips, exploring new hobbies, and spending quality time together. One sunny afternoon, as we were having a picnic in the park, I looked around at my family and felt a deep sense of gratitude. Despite the hardships, we had found our way to a place of peace and happiness. The past would always be a part of us, but it no longer defined us. In the end, I realized that life is about embracing the present and looking forward to the future, no matter how uncertain it may be. With Laura and Jake by my side, I knew we could face anything that came our way. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly hopeful. So, Reddit. That's where my story stands now. It's been a roller coaster of emotions, and there were times I didn't think we'd make it. But here we are, still standing, still fighting for each other. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that love isn't always easy, but it's always worth fighting for.